This is the Fatty Joe Show, coming to you from Casa de Carrie, deep in the forests of Nutmegerville. This show is dedicated to exploring pathways to better health from a holistic perspective. In each episode, we will explore such topics as nutrition, mental and emotional health, fitness, and more. I'm Yogi, your host, and I became interested in studying health after conventional health dogma became damaging and led me to become massively overweight. Against modern convention, I went on a keto lifestyle and I lost over 300 pounds and gained a level of control on my personal health that I never had before. Now I'm on a journey to find out what is myth and what is truth in the ever convoluted world of what is considered healthy. Come join me on a journey of discovery as I look for a path to improve total health. If you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/thefattyjoeshow or patreon.com/carriebrown. If you want to check out all of our social media links and recipes, head to carriebrown.com. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, and subscribe to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fatty Joe Show. We are coming to you from the Nutmegger Forest at Casa de Carrieland there in Connecticut. And today we have a guest from the medical profession who also has his own podcast. The podcast is called the Quadcast. And this is Dr. Kwadwo. And I have seen his last name, but I am not going to attempt to try to pronounce it, because I know I will butcher it. Yes. So I will not do that. But I love these types of interviews because especially this one's going to be pretty interesting because Dr. Kwadwo is a newcomer to the low carb and keto world, and is a recent convert, and he is actually helping his patients who are suffering from metabolic syndromes such as diabetes, such as heart disease and things like that, to be introduced to a low carb diet. And he's not just about low carb, he's about all aspects of health and going beyond the typical medical practice, which is pretty amazing. So we're going to get into some really awesome discussion here. But what I want from Kwadwo right now is his superhero origin story. We want to know where you came from and how Dr. Kwadwo came into being.
First of all, thank you for the intro, Yogi. That was precious. Second, there's a reason some people call me Dr. K because the last name is sinister. It's Kyeremanteng, but not as bad as it looks. But thanks for having me, buddy. This is going to be a lot of fun. So, I mean, in terms of, the superpower, where all this came from, to be honest with you, as you said, I'm new to this low carb keto space. And what got me there was taking care of COVID patients. Actually, it was crazy to see the amount of patients that are coming in with obesity, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, poor metabolic health. You know what I'm saying? And and they were doing worse compared to people that were, say, had better metabolic health. So then we ask ourselves, is there something we could do about this? And then you catch wind of low carb, keto. You're hearing about carnivore. You hear about fasting, and my closest thing to improving nutrition, metabolic health is I fast personally. So that's where I kind of have a relationship to any of this. But then you read about the fact that you could reverse type 2 diabetes within weeks. You could improve. You could have people off their medication. You could have people off their antihypertensives or their blood pressure medications. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Why aren't we telling everybody about how effective these methods can be? Because, yes, during this pandemic, we want to mask, we want to distance, we want to do all the right things to try and mitigate our risk. But man, an inexpensive, sustainable method to be able to get people healthier and not only improve their chances against COVID, but, heart disease, stroke, cancer, mental health, all these stuff gets improved if we were smarter about this. I was like, yo, we got to change gears, my friend. We got to start preaching this to the world. You know what I mean? So then on our show, like Quadcaster Solving Healthcare, we started to like really promote some of the advantages of low carb and keto. You know, how it affects your heart, how it affects your mind. So Carrie Brown, one of our most popular episodes when Carrie came in the mix, how it affects your immune system, all the stuff we started to cover because we're like, hey guys, this is time to get healthy. We did a little summit too with Ivor Cummins and Joy Kitty, who's a nutritionist, also Dr. Paul Brown, and just to get that word out, you know what I'm saying, Yogi? Like, because it's just too important and such an ideal time for people to get healthy. So this is what spawned it for me, and I've been preaching this every chance I get on a podcast, on media, on social media. I'm just like, guys, like, let's hustle and get people's metabolically healthy.
That's awesome, man. And first of all, before I get into what I'm about to say, I want you to take about 3 steps backwards because I want everybody to see your shirt.
Oh, snap. Okay, here we go. Snap.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. All right. 2 more steps back. 2 more steps back. We can't see it. All right. There you go. All right. That's awesome, man. So for those who are listening on the podcast, Kwadwo has this awesome shirt on about his podcast and about health and everything. That's part of his marketing for his podcast, and it's really cool. So,
thanks, buddy.
What you are talking about has been going around in the medical world for a long time, but because of factors, people don't really talk about it. There was a book written in the 1930s by a dentist named Weston A. Price, Dr. Weston A. Price, called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And he went around the world studying different populations he would try to find identical populations, one in their native diets and everything, and then the other in more urban areas where they were starting to convert to the standard American diet. And he noted within one generation that people's immune systems would just go haywire. Their jaw structure and everything goes down. But he tested the blood of several people in the more rural traditional areas that were eating traditional foods, and many of them had tuberculosis, but they were asymptomatic. They were not showing symptoms, and most of the time the symptoms never presented themselves. But when he went into urban settings where people were eating the new standard American diet, more people who were symptomatic. The ratio of infected was about the same, but more people were symptomatic. Wow. So we're seeing something similar with COVID now, right?
Exactly. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, we know that when you have more inflammation, so which insulin produces more inflammation, your body goes haywire. This is when you form plaques in your arteries. This is when you come into the ICU with septic shock and needing medications to support your blood pressure. We know that inflammation that happens in the lungs that are associated with COVID gets worse. Not only COVID, but any infection in the lung. So this is exactly it. And I think, to have that awareness, to increase that awareness, to talk about why it matters to improve your metabolic health, why we need to improve your insulin sensitivity, reduce insulin resistance, for the reasons you just busted out. Like, these are studies that you mentioned that are old here, and so we've known this for a while. But I got to tell you, medical school. I mean, obviously, I trained in Canada. I'm sure a lot of the docs that you've had on from the States will say the same thing. We do not talk about nutrition basically at all. Keto and low carb is a complete foreign concept. I've heard this. I'm grown, and I've been practicing medicine for over 15 years, and I'm learning about this in 2020, my friend. So this is an uphill battle, but it's worth the battle. and we need to do our best to get the word out. And I got to tell you too, Yogi, one of the things that's important to me is not only to educate, citizens about the importance of this stuff, but also like healthcare providers, man. Because you reach out to one doc or nurse practitioner that gets engaged and believes in this stuff, you are impacting so many lives, my friend. Like that doc could not, also directly uh, engage their patient pool or what have you, but the patients within there could also engage their own family, because that's the way it happens, right? Dad got better doing this low carb thing, man. I think I could lose the extra 15 pounds, right? And then that cycle and that message just goes through. So honestly, I think there's the idea of trying to reach out not only to the people out there, but to docs, to nurses, to naturopaths. I don't care. Like anybody that sees patients is such an important angle.
Yeah, it seems too that a lot of doctors are making the conversion. Uh, they've been told about low carb, they've heard about it, but many of them dismissed it because it wasn't the common knowledge of medical or nutritional science of what they were used to. They were used to plant-based. They were used to, eat your grains and your legumes and things like that as your main part of your diet, and then meat should be very tiny at the top, and you should get very little to no fat in your diet. And this was what we were taught for a long time, and we now know that this was a food pyramid put on by Coca-Cola and several other of these companies that were manufacturing these products that they wanted to sell you. But this was the dogma set up by Ansel Keys and things that have become the accepted, not necessarily the correct, the accepted science. And what I've seen is, for most doctors, they weren't converts until they saw the results in their patients.
Mhm.
Was that something similar with you?
I mean, this is what I've been seeing. Like I got a buddy we did a show with a colleague of mine, Dr. Tom Saris. He's an ICU doc as well. He was seeing what we were seeing in terms of COVID infecting people that were more obese and diabetic, and he converted himself. He was like, you know what, I'm gonna start going low carb. I'm gonna start fasting, and lost that 30 pounds in a short period of time because of what he was seeing. Not only at the bedside, but also seeing throughout patients that we've seen go low carb and have that positive outcome. I have a colleague. She's a nurse, and they heard a couple of our shows about low carb. She's diabetic on 2 meds. Within 10 days, my friend, she's off for diabetic meds. 10 days. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and so like we see these stories, we hear these stories, when you see it yourself, it's hard not to get behind it. And honestly, docs, you could read a bunch of studies and all that kind of stuff. But as you said, Yogi, when you get to see it yourself, those testimonials, and you see it in your own patients, how can you ignore it? How can you dismiss it? I don't care what the studies say, man. What's in front of you is happening. Like you can't ignore this. And so it's true what you're saying. Like when it comes to seeing it yourself, it's powerful.
Now, I want to roll back around and I want to explain so people understand why we brought up COVID. You were, because of being an ICU doc, you were on the front lines of this COVID fight. You're dealing with COVID patients like coming in like firsthand.
Mhm.
And so we're not talking to somebody that's dealing with COVID in theory. We're
Mhm.
dealing with somebody right now, Dr. Kwadwo is dealing with COVID hands on and taking care of patients and seeing results firsthand.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
what are you seeing out there in these front lines?
Oh, that's a big question, Yogi. I so once again, the patients that we're seeing, in Canada where I'm at, often are diabetic, obese. They might have poor immune system because they're immunocompromised, older patients. There's always exceptions, but those are the typical ones. Um, and unfortunately, part of COVID is that it takes a while to get better. Like if you're sick enough to come into the intensive care unit, um, it takes a while for your lungs to heal. And I must say the treatments that we've now are implementing are making a difference. Like we start them on steroids. We try and avoid them going on a ventilator, as opposed to at the beginning of the pandemic, we were told to put them on our patients on a ventilator early. So patients we're seeing come through, and we're seeing them pull through. The ones for the most part that pass away are you can see it coming. Like they're not young. They're often like our average age of people that pass away from COVID in our province is about 84 years old. Um, so it's unfortunate, but you do see it coming on a lot of our patients. But um, the encouraging thing is I think people are surviving with the new treatments that we've been implementing. And I think also in especially in Canada, people are wearing either making sure not to get in have large gatherings, they're distancing, they're wearing their masks. So I think all that has contributed to better outcomes. But man, I gotta tell you, Yogi, at the beginning of this thing, it was pretty scary. Like when you saw what was happening in New York and Washington State and in Italy, you just wasn't sure what was going to happen. You weren't sure what was like. Are we going to contract COVID by like some of the other healthcare providers? But luckily, we've been able to protect ourselves, and we saw our patients doing better. So it's actually been this you're gonna I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but in some ways it's been a, our team is really bonded because of it. Like we have this really clear purpose in trying to get our society through COVID, get our patients through COVID. And so at the beginning of the pandemic there was a lot of encouragement and nice messages from the public saying we support you and thank you for doing what you're doing, and it meant a lot, and it really brought us together. And you're gonna think this is crazy, but at some points I was actually looking forward to going to work just to be able to have that camaraderie, that team feeling, and that sense of family. And it was crazy. It was crazy.
Well, it's like that whole concept of a band of brothers. When you're going to warfare, you have a common mission, you have a common goal, and you're trying to protect one another. You become very tight, like much like a family. Or like look at the team dynamics of people playing on a team sport, and the closeness and the bond that they come because of that common mission, that common ground. So I could totally understand that. That's
Yeah. And
it's a tribe.
that's exactly it. It's a great analogy. Like I played hockey my whole life, and you are a team, and you have that common purpose, and you bond like crazy. Like the guys that I grew up playing hockey with, I might not see him for 20 years, but the second we see each other, it's like, what's up? How we
Yeah.
doing? You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it was a similar feeling.
Yeah, I could totally understand that. And you, so you've been dealing with this on the front lines, and you have had this epiphany of health and nutrition and other things. How has it affected Kwadwo personally? Has it changed some of the ways that you practice things for yourself in your own life?
Yeah, that's a great question, Yogi. There's a few things that I've really approached things at, like, because of the fear of contracting COVID at the beginning of the pandemic. We made a real point of not only getting healthy, not only eating better, but also being sound mind. Like really trying to minimize stress, really trying to have that self care component. Do whatever tools that I need to be able to be at ease at work and not be ultra stressed, because that's not going to help my immune system. That's not going to help my ability to take care of my patients. And so, when at the beginning when everything was locked down, all the gyms were closed. Bought myself a kettlebell. Bought the kids a kettlebell too. I have 3 kids, and we would do a routine every morning. You know, trying to stay in shape, and it was a lot of fun, and also lessons for the kids. You know, just to value the importance of fitness. Um, I've always, for the last 3 years, I've done intermittent fasting, so I've continued to push that along throughout the pandemic. With the knowledge of low carb, I've reduced my carb intake. I'm not perfect, but definitely I'm on the lower side compared to where I was at the beginning of the pandemic. And then, like in terms of like mental health too, like once again, take time to decompress, like to do a nightly meditation, like just for 5 minutes. That's all I need. And I find it does a real good job to calm the mind, slow it down. It also gives me a chance to reflect and give some gratitude towards like the things that are important to me, like my family, my friends, my health. Um, so yeah, some those are some of the things that's changed. The other thing, actually, Yogi, that's changed a little bit was trying to stay connected. Like I think that was an important part of not only being a human being, but you realize how important it is when you can't connect. Like so during the height of the pandemic, when you haven't seen your friends in a while, so haven't seen your family in a while, and man, you realize like this is an important part of life. This is what we're on this earth to do, is to connect. So uh, now I try and make more of a point to reach out to my friends, and even if it's just a random text message to say what up, or I hope the kids are good, and you know, things like that.
That's awesome, man. From the sounds of it, and I've so far interviewed a couple, but from the sounds of it, you're starting to think less like a doctor and more like an engineer. We're seeing a lot of the start of the low carb and keto and carnivore coming from the engineers, the people in Silicon Valley, because they're not looking at a specific problem and trying to deal with the symptoms. They're looking at the problems in the computer world. They're looking at whole systems and how they work together. So they have this mindset. Whereas in a lot of the medical world, especially in the specialist world, you know, when you get a hammer, everything's a nail. You get focused in on just dealing with this thing, and you've got a different perspective going on, where you're looking at whole symptoms, your emotional health, your connectivity, your well-being, your stress levels, and how it all affects your health.
Mhm.
Much like the way engineer thinks, and you see in the medical industry, especially with specialists, if they're a surgeon, then surgery fixes everything, you know. And then if you know, if they're if they're an oncologist, then everything's cancer. If it's,
Mm.
you know, so you're not going that route, and you are a specialist, but you were more, you're looking at things in a more broader context.
Well, you know what it is, Yogi? Like, there's a couple things. Like, one, because as an ICU doc, like you can't be isolating on things. You have to look at all systems. Like the heart affects the kidneys, kidneys affect the lungs. Like all these kind of things are interplayed. So you always are thinking thing. If you're a good ICU doc, you got to be looking at things holistically. So that's already kind of part of our nature. The other thing too, because I do a lot of research on how to make healthcare more sustainable. In other words, how do we reduce spending but also improve care to our patients and their families? And one of the biggest ways of saving money and improving the care that for all of us is for you never to walk into the ICU. Like the ICU is it's horrible. Like we're good at, yes, we're good at maintaining your life, but I'll tell you this much: if you have a prolonged ICU admission, you're going to have potential pain syndromes. You're going to have some PTSD and some anxiety from not being able to articulate when you're in pain, when you're not to be able to articulate when you're anxious. People putting a suction catheter down your mouth and through your to your lungs, and you feel like you're choking periodically. It is not pleasant, and it's a difficult thing to go through. And 1% of your gross domestic product goes to taking care of ICU patients. tons of money invested into that. So if I could stop y'all from even walking in the door, life is way better. Life is way better. And so, in my world, we don't talk enough about prevention because maybe because there's no money in prevention. It doesn't. That's maybe another discussion. But man, like if you really want to make a difference, as far as I'm concerned, of reducing spending and improving the outcomes of our patients, don't come in. Let's do everything we can in our power to make sure you don't walk in, or we get wheeled in, I should say, into the intensive care unit. So that's where that passion has come from.
And I think that's a great point because one of my problems with a lot of the way the politicians focus on affordable health care in not just the US, but in many countries, is they're focusing on sick care, what to do after people get sick, but they're not focusing on how to keep people from getting sick in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, if you want to lower the GDP when it comes to taking care of, and the GDP to take care of sick people right now in the US is extremely high. I believe it was oh god, it was pushing close to 50%, I think, at one point. I'm not sure where the numbers are now, but it was very high. It was a lot of money. That money we most likely would rather spend elsewhere than drugs, medication, and treatment. So focusing in on the preventative care is something I love to hear coming out of doctors' mouths.
Yeah, and I hope more of us start talking like this because, especially, you COVID is a tragedy, but there's things that you want to be able to learn from it and to be able to take away from it. And there's a lot of lessons that we could talk about, but one of them would be, hey, if we could avoid you from getting sick in the first place, let's do everything we can to prevent that from happening. And so, and that's the thing too. Like if you invest in preventative care, that ultimately it will leave you with more resources. I promise you. And so
Yeah.
when you do become sick, you have ideally all the resources in the world to get you better. Because right now, like Canada and US have some similarities, and I think this is one of them. Even if you have sick care, you're not necessarily getting the bells and whistles that you necessarily like. For example, one of the passions I talk about, and it's kind of similar to prevention. It's when you're in ICU, one of the most important people to your care, period. I don't care what anybody says, is a physiotherapist. Okay. Because Yogi, God forbid, if you ever end up in the ICU, we could, all the medicines, all the machines, they're very effective at keep maintaining your life. But if you want to get back to Connecticut and stay functional and do all the stuff that you love, we got to work on that. And that's a physiotherapist and getting you up, getting you strong, And one of the things that the first things that get cut when when we're over budget is physio. Are you getting that? And like sometimes the physiotherapist, we don't even get the care on the weekend or whatever. And so if you have that budget by pushing towards prevention, there's more money towards available for if you do get sick, and then hopefully you could get the bells and whistles to get you back on your feet, functional, strong. You know what I'm saying? And ready to go.
That's a great point too, is a lot of people, even after a car accident, they don't get the physical therapy. They don't get I have recently Corey Mordowski, who is a physical therapy assistant. He talks about women who give birth, not getting proper physical therapy after giving birth to help them. So I love that. When we're talking about preventative care, we've talked about nutrition a bit, but there's other factors that come into play, not just nutrition, not just getting out and working out, but what you're again thinking like an engineer, you're thinking about entire systems that come into all play. What are some other systems that we need to focus on to not have to be a patient in the ICU?
Yeah, I love that question because this, once again, we're in different countries um, but one thing that is clear to me is that people have to have a, a basic level of almost income or like they have to be able to um, fund themselves. Like they can't be poor. Like poor socioeconomic status is monstrous. Like if you don't have a home to stay in, if you can't get access to quality food, if you don't have a place where you could walk at night because it's not safe. Like what you really need is that kind of safety and that ability to fend for yourself. Because a lot comes down to if you have enough basic income to be able to get these basic stuff like I said, quality food, uh, a bed to sleep in, avoid being in a violent circumstances. Like a lot of that, I think if you were to focus in on one of the major areas, socioeconomics is a monster. And what COVID has shown us too is it illustrates that. Like one of the reasons the people that are getting hardest hit are the ones that are poorer, that have less resources. And so I think that when you talk about prevention, and I'm not meaning to get political or at all, but like how whatever way what side of the fence you're on, like I think taking care of the ones that need help, um, can also be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, they've done a lot of research in disease transmission, in one of the things that they seen from the times that they were dealing with polio, from the times that they were dealing with typhoid, with the whole typhoid Mary story, is they always saw that a lot of these diseases spread rampantly in the slums, the barrios, and the
Hmm.
poor areas, and areas where people did not have access to nutrition, areas that people were in higher stress, worked longer hours, more physically demanding labor. And they some experiments that were done, and I'm trying to remember the program, but these experiments were done in some certain areas where they just focused in on making sure people had basic needs.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily handouts, it was just making sure the opportunity was there for people to get education,
Mm.
with a big one. And a group that's really great on this is Save the Children. They've shown a lot of data over the years where if you educate communities and you create opportunities and you create potential for prosperity for individuals and the community itself, then disease transmission goes down, violent crime goes down, stress, medical demands of illnesses go down, which means there's less demand on the system itself. There's more prosperity in the community. GDP goes up. Like there's so many different things. And when the GDP went up in the areas that were poor, rich people benefited from it because there was more expendable income to spend on the things that the rich people were selling and
You-
services.
Oh man, that you're killing it right there. Like it's so true. And yeah, I wish more people could see this, and really get behind it. It's actually one of the reasons our through our podcast we started a charity called Bridges Over Barriers, and it's similar to the principles of Save the Children. We were seeing mental illness. We're seeing the cycle of families coming in and out of hospital and overdoses and so forth. And we thought, you know what, we just need to do our best to help out those kids and those families. And so it's a program where social workers at schools, they have access to this fund to be able to provide kids with basic needs, like if they need shoes, if they need a bus pass, if they want to be part of a boys and girls club but can't afford it, or a sports team. Like that fund is there for them. And it's just for those reasons you're talking about. Just like people need to have, there needs to be a certain level of of safety and income there so that they could be kids and live a life. And so yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, my friend.
Let's talk. Let's delve into the income side of things real quick. Okay, so we've talked about stress and stress leading to inflammation, stress, the inflammation leading to other problems such as uh, arterial sclerosis and things like that. One of the things that people don't take account as part of their health that affects their physical well-being is income, is financial stability. And I'm not talking about getting wealthy, but not being in fear of losing your place because you can't pay the rent, not living in fear because you can't put food on the table for your kids.
Mhm.
And this causes a great amount of stress, a great amount of inflammation, and often leads to other things as well that cause health issues, such as self medication through substance abuse.
Wow.
S-
Yeah,
And this causes other societal problems, right?
exactly. This is what I'm saying. Like having a basic income, like is could go such a long way. And I know it's not intuitive, like to be able to, there's always the fear of freeloaders and so forth. But if you're gonna prevent kids from getting into trouble because they have to spend more times in poor neighborhoods, they don't have that income to be able to do activities and stay active. Um, they're living the day to day on that level of stress as you talk about, like paycheck to paycheck. Are we going to be able to afford our home? Are we going to be sleeping in our car? Like all that stuff adds up, man. Mentally, physically, all that adds up, and that's going to increase the risk of coming into your hospital with whether it's diabetes, overdose, suicide attempt. All these things are amplified in these circumstances. So financial stability, amen. Yes, it's such an important aspect to quality healthcare. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Yogi.
There was a period of time in the US where there was no middle class. Middle class is fairly a modern invention. But what had created the modern middle class in the US had a large part to do with how the government after post World War II invested it back into the people with tax dollars. And they didn't just do handouts. Like people think you got to get a handout to make everything. But what they did was they created opportunities. They created work that affected the country in a positive way, building roads, building highways. Through that work, they provided training. They invested in schools, and they created a standard of opportunity that allowed people who were previously very poor to change their status in life and develop this whole middle class and develop the ability for people to go buy houses, live less stress, and created basically the idyllic 1950s that we think of when we watch Ozzie and Harriet or Leave It to Beaver. And that was done because of an investment into opportunities for the people, and then the people taking advantage of those opportunities.
What you're describing is very Canadian, my friend, too. Like you know, we take pride in taking care of people that can't take care of themselves. And I'm not sure from a historical point of view when middle class really developed, but certainly I think we do pay more in taxes, but we take care of our unemployed. We make sure that everyone has basic health care. Like no matter how much you make, no matter what you look like, no matter what country actually you're from, if you walk into my hospital or any hospital in this country, you're going to get cared for. You're going to get the care that you need to survive. And so it's just kind of what you're describing is very, I just wanted to point it out, it's very Canadian. And so I'm just giving a little shout out to a little props to the Canadian flow over here, man.
Yeah, and this is not to go, I'm not going political on any of this. This is not what I intention. I definitely believe in a teach a man to fish philosophy, but I just, in general, I feel that in society will be much healthier the more opportunities are created for prosperity for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
There will be more funding for research into health and to things. There will be more services provided because a lot, and ethics aside, but a lot of our modern research that we figured out what was healthy and what wasn't healthy was actually research done on treating people of low income. They traded the treatment for the ability to gather data to figure out what works. And then the people that benefited off of that were usually the higher echelon in the socioeconomics because they unfortunately it was the people lower that were tested on and then it was but at the same time the trade-off was people in lower socioeconomics got the care that they needed. And today we have some really weird dynamics that we're unfamiliar with in history, and we are seeing that the people who are in lower socioeconomic standards are developing these lifestyle illnesses in a widespread manner that used to be just associated with the wealthy. Things like type 2 diabetes, things like gout, things like, you know, and there's a shift, and it has to do with primarily with diet, but also stress, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to delineate what's a bigger player, like, but there's a, there's going to be stress when you're not. It's hard to make ends meet, and it also, as we kind of alluded to, if you don't have a a reliable source of income, it's hard to get real food, like quality food, whole foods. That that's a big barrier to that. So, yes, we are seeing more poor metabolic health in low socioeconomic circumstances. We're seeing more obesity, diabetes, hypertension, unfortunately. And so, I think stress and nutrition play are both issues there, but it's hard to delineate what's a bigger factor. I mean, if I were going to say a bigger factor, I'd say it's definitely the nutrition, um, but it's unfortunate.
Well, we also have research that shows, and I'm a big proponent for nutrition. Nutrition fixed a lot of issues that I have, and I'm a ongoing process as well. But nutrition is just one role. We're looking at sleep.
Yes.
If you're in a poor area, you're working possibly shift work, or you're being woke up at night to crime happening around you, or you're not getting sleep because you're worried about the rent, or these are things. So that plays a role. But let's also look at connection in these urban areas, in these areas where there is a higher crime level, there is things like that. You may not allow your children to go out and play, to get sunshine, to connect with others, which can delay social development, which can delay the ability to get along, which can prohibit the ability to find a decent job because you don't know how to socially interact. It can develop PTSD symptoms in the children that they carry on as they're older. And in this country, most men especially don't like to seek therapy for these things. So these things go untreated, and especially men of color in this area. We had Toby Jenkins on the podcast, and he talked about how that is a huge stigma in certain cultural areas of Black communities, Hispanic communities, and things like that, that you don't seek help. And if you even want to, that resource may not be there.
You hit on some home runs there, Yogi. Like, first of all, the sleep aspect. Wow, I can't believe we hadn't talked about that yet. Like, I think it is. I mean, you talk about inflammation, you talk about insulin resistance. If you ain't sleeping, that's a straight up factor, no doubt about it. And for all the reasons you mentioned, why it would be more difficult to sleep in poor communities, I'll echo that. Um, but yeah, and this one of the things I would love to see if there is that we're trying to overcome that taboo of mental health and seeking out help. And like, my wife's a psychologist, so I'm a little bit biased, but man, I think we've come a long way in terms of the stigma of reaching out for help when you need it. like in terms of getting the counseling or the psychological services when you're dealing with PTSD, depression, anxiety, whatever it might be. But man, we still have a ways to go. Like, and you prove mental health, in my opinion. It's another one that would give you a huge bang for your buck. Like when I see it every day in the hospital when people are coming in with either their overdoses or any substance abuse, the depression. But you also see it when it comes to the patients doing their best to try or the patients that are trying to recover. The ones that are more resilient or have a positive outlook, they have better results. Like I see it every day. The ones that are like, you know what, I'm tired right now. I'm down, but I'm gonna get out of bed anyway. I'm gonna walk with that physiotherapist and push through. Those are the guys that excel. And but yeah, man, I truly wish um the stigma of mental illness, we could overcome that. And I'm optimistic that like we're going to be like, I think we're in a much better spot than we were, say, even 5 years ago, but we still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I agree. I worked in a field for many years. I worked in nonprofit groups. One of the areas that I worked in was group homes for at-risk kids. And here in the US, these group homes have a 99% failure rating.
Failure.
Right? Failure.
Wow.
99% of the kids that enter the group home systems in the US are going to end up either in jail for violent crimes, usually, or drugs. They're going to often end up dead or on the streets. And so they're judging these factors of failure. A lot of it has to do with the fact that one, the issues these children are carrying with them with PTSD through abuse, through abandonment, lack of connection, being able to build solid connections with family members, being shuttled around between different group homes because they don't want a connection to be made with these children. And the other factors are nutrition, are these things. So these kids don't end up growing up to be, for the most part, what we would consider productive members of society. They're becoming what we would consider hooligans. They're in crime. They're on the streets. They're self-medicating because they've never been taught how to deal with their problems.
Oh man, it breaks my heart to hearing that. And this is why I think, you know it just reinforces the idea that we could do better. Like we did a couple shows on with a child psychologist, and you know the couple things that I learned is that kids are resilient. they they'd struggle like we struggle when it comes to mental illness and all these things, but if we intervene early, we can. There, it doesn't have to be 99%.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. And so I'm not sure what the magic bullet is there, but I just hope that we collectively could do a better job at addressing these kids that are high risk.
It seems to me, whether it's nutrition, whether it's societal issues, one of the major issues we have in modern society is not necessarily the lack of resources, but the lack of tools to know how to take advantage of these resources. So teaching people the tools, and let's look at nutrition. We're not teaching people, we're not even teaching our doctors about nutrition. And how many doctors do you see who are obese? And then they're telling their patients, you need to lose weight. But they're working 20 hours a day, no sleep, not getting proper sleep, eating what's out of the cafeteria, which is usually junk food, when processed industrial oils, zero nutritional count. And then they're telling their patients, you got to do better. And so the doctors are not getting the tools to take advantage of the resources. And then let alone you start going down that chain of lower socioeconomics, of more rural areas, of kids who, like I said, are in the group homes, who are not getting the tools they need to make their lives better and gain some of these resources that are available to them.
Yeah, it's. I mean, but hopefully this is what This is why we're talking now, my friend. This is what I think it's important to have these conversations, increase the awareness, open people's mind grapes, because
Yeah.
this is it's too much. It's like we could do better. We collectively could do better, and it doesn't take much. Improving somebody's nutritional status or being aware of some of the tools that they can use to improve their overall well-being. It's not rocket science. And I don't know I don't know what it's going to take, but certainly having these conversations, getting the word out, preaching, screaming to the world the importance of these things, hopefully is making a thread of difference. Because I'm sure in your circles with doing the show, with the friends and family that you've got to connect with. I know in my world, we talked about cases that where we saw people making a difference. Like we just got to continue to push forward, my friend.
Yeah, you're obviously a child of an immigrant. Of immigrants. We've talked about that earlier, but let's look at that connection thing for a moment, because I've gotten to travel in my life, and I've seen some different areas and how connection and family structure is different in a lot of the other countries I've been to than what it's become here in the West, in the States, of the rat race of trying to get things done. And I've seen how it affects health. Uh, from a lot of the other countries that I've been to, especially the third world country, the structure, the family bonds, and the connections are incredibly strong. And the act of having meals with one another, cooking dinner, and families getting together and talking and being around and having this time. I mean, I was in areas of the Philippines where entire towns would shut down for the 20th fiesta of the year, and it was only halfway through the year, and everybody's coming out with the food that they made, and sharing, and people are walking down the street and partying and stuff. It wasn't just immediate family, but the community was your family.
Yeah.
Because the community looked out for one another, and you saw people who were maybe not eating what we would, even in the keto world, say was healthy, but their health markers were better.
Amen.
So
Yeah.
there's something to that as well.
I think I mean, honestly, what is this world without connection? Really, what is it? You know what I mean? Like we see it on a regular basis with even infants, or like you get a newborn that's not never gets held. That patient will die, or that baby will die. Same thing we see on the other end of life. If you got a lonely person, especially we're seeing it now because of all the restrictions of visiting long-term care or nursing homes, um, patients are dying of loneliness, that lack of connection where they can't see family, they can't see friends. It's a real thing. And you look at what it's going to improve your quality of life. Those just think of the times when you're the most happy. It's not when you're in front of your computer reading about some meme, or reading about something on Twitter about politics or whatever's going on locally. It's about when you're with your friends, when you're laughing with your family. You think about those dinners at Christmas or Thanksgiving when Uncle Jim took off his shirt during the middle of the dinner because for whatever reason. I mean, I know at our house we take off our shirts routinely at dinner. Um, but like, you know what I mean? It's like those times where you connect, times like this, you and I, man, we're not going to forget this. I'm not going to forget my conversation with Yogi and talking about how we're going to change the world. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is what life is all about. And so, in all the stuff we do, this is what we got to keep in mind. And my family's from Ghana. When I walk off that plane and go into Accra, or into Ghana, oh my God, you feel like that family connection, that family warmth, relatives I've never met in my life, instant connection, and that bond, and that feeling in your heart when you're all together. Amazing, amazing. And it's true what you say though about what we can learn from, non-Western cultures about, not necessarily eating together, that rat race. Like it's certainly something that we've tried to bring it in our households with our kids, is like, you know what, it's dinner time. We're going to sit together. We're going to chat. You're going to tell us about how, you know, you got punched in the chest by Ricky at school today, and we're going to laugh about it, or we're going to cry about it. But this is family bonding time, and we also do it at night too. We try and all get together to the kids and read their books. It's important. So yeah, Yogi, I totally hear what you're saying, and I'm a big believer of trying to create that connection and everything we do. Like whenever any kind of new endeavor or whatever, I'm always about how do we stay connected to make it a more enjoyable experience.
That's awesome, man. So we're coming up on the time here, and before we close out, I want to ask you 5 questions that ask to especially my guests in the nutritional world. And the first question is, who are your top 5 health heroes?
Top 5? Oh my
Yeah.
God, that's a lot. Okay, top 5 health heroes. Do they got to be in the nutritional space, or it could be anything?
No, it could be
Okay.
anything.
All right. The two guys when it comes to strength and conditioning, Dan John and Pavel Teslutzin. These guys are wickedly knowledgeable when it comes to strength and conditioning training. I base my workouts on these guys. Program called Easy Strength, which is a great way to just put on, like, create a more strong frame and to improve on your lifts. And Pavel's big on kettlebell. Actually, they're both big on kettlebells. I started doing that about a year ago, or just around the time of the pandemic, and reduce my body fat percentage, maintain my weight, a little bit more cut, killing it. I love those two guys. Who else? Okay, another health heroes. When it comes to nutrition, I learned a lot from, honestly, Rob Wolf. I've learned a ton from Rob Wolf. We had him on the show too. Super knowledgeable guy, very humble for how much he knows. Very pro, low carb, keto, paleo. Learned a ton from him. And I got to give 2 more. Let's see. I learned a ton about sleep by Kirk Parsley. He came on the show too. We haven't released that show yet. Just to, really emphasizing the value of sleep and which is always a healthy reminder. And then last, oh my God, and the 5th one, we'll go with oh geez, I'm struggling, buddy. Health heroes.
Your wife. Your wife.
My wife. Yes, I love it. Just because my wife, I'll go with my wife because she, the value she puts in with mental health and creating that resilience and you can't go wrong there.
There you go.
I love it. You're my hero.
Well, you said your wife is a psychologist, so I knew she had to be up there somewhere. So
yeah, no, she honestly, I've, like, all jokes aside, learned a ton from her. Yeah.
So definitely. What are 3 foods you think everybody should include in their diet?
3 foods that they should include in their diet. I am a big, like, I'm a big fan of red meat. I'm from Alberta, which is the Texas of Canada, essentially. It's hard for, like, as a guy that has a lot of emphasis on building body mass, being strong, got iron, all your micronutrients with high quality red meat. I don't like that's where I lie, and I know it could be controversial depending on where you are, but yeah, Um, eggs. I'm a big fan of eggs. Really protein dense, look good on the micronutrient end. I don't worry about the cholesterol aspect. I don't think there's a foundation for any of that. And then the third food that I think everybody should eat. I'm not good on the science of this, but I'm a big avocado fan because you got your good fats. Actually, avocado or free range. Like we also a big fan of like trout and stuff, like with the good amount of omega 3, omega 6s, healthy, lean protein. I don't. That's another one that I'm a big fan of. I know I said 4 there, so
That's
I
okay.
apologize.
That's totally fine. So I got extra credit.
Yeah.
So, what are 3 foods you think everybody should avoid?
Yeah, I think some overrated and unnecessary any like cereals, like box cereals, like I honestly think they have almost no value. Um, there's some stuff maybe you would argue for fiber, but I think you get fiber in other ways. I would say other foods that any the more I'm reading about seed oils, like anything that's really seed oil based, really I think this is not contributing any value to nutrition, to insulin resistance and so forth. So uh, avoiding seed oils. And then another food to avoid. I would just say like I'm also not a huge fan of like like white bread like stuff, like bagels, like I think very very calorie rich, the high glycemic index. Um, I think foods like that I think aren't producing much value, and I think yeah, I think I would if I had say in the world, we would see less of that.
What is a nutritional myth or a health myth in general that you wish you could dispel overnight?
I think the calorie in, calorie out one. I'm a believer is a like all calories are the same. Like if you, that I think we should start to dispel. Like if you see that, you know, this cup of ice cream is 200 calories versus this half an avocado is 200 calories. I don't think that's the same. Like I think that's I used to be a believer of calorie in, calorie out, but more I'm reading about it, the impact it has on your hormones, specifically insulin. I think we could throw that theory out the door. I think that's more clear than for me anyway than it has been in the past.
And if there was something you could change overnight about the medical system, what would that be?
We talked about the emphasis on prevention, but another one that would be of monster value would be if everyone and their mother had a conversation with their loved ones about their values and what's important to them near the end of life. I think that would be tremendous. I think, if dad, you sit down with dad and he tells you that being independent, being able to care for himself is the most important thing to him. And then if he ever was in a position not to be able to speak for himself, to be able to know that uh, could lead dad to the more optimal direction of his care when he comes to see someone like us. Because once again, when you come into an ICU and you need to be go through what you go through, and we're not able to achieve your goals, I don't want to essentially torture you for no without that possibility of achieving your goals. And often when we see our patients, they've never had that conversation with their loved ones, and so the family is left with this huge burden of trying to figure out what they should do. Whereas having that conversation with their loved ones now, and knowing what's important to them, that burden comes a significant burden comes off their shoulders, and we could do what would be in your loved one's best interest.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't think anybody has put it that way before, or broached that subject before, and it definitely could help if people had less fear about talking about what's going to happen after, what to do, how to approach that. So now we want our listeners to be able to find you, to be able to hear your podcast, bring out that information. So let's hear all that contact details, man.
Yes. I mean, the simplest way, you'll find everything you need about me on solvinghealthcare.ca or solvinghealthcare.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube at Quadcast. You can find our podcast on wherever you find podcasts, like Apple, Spotify. We're everywhere. And some of the conferences we've done, we did a low carb summit that's all on our website. You can check that out. And we're going to continue to hustle. We're going to continue to get that word out on prevention and getting people healthier, my friend.
And definitely listen to the podcast. I will post things to the show notes of all the contact information, so you'll find things there, plus a link to the podcast as well. And the other thing I'm going to encourage my listeners is we definitely can use your support. We are a listener-supported podcast, so make sure that you like and share episodes. It helps us get out there. Leave a rating, review, especially on Apple iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Make sure that you check out the carriebrown.com website. We have a ton of things going on there: cookbooks, master classes for cooking, bunches of free recipes, including recipes using organ meat so you can really up that nutrient count but not taste like liver. We got those. We also have a Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/The Fatty Joe or patreon.com/Carrie Brown, you can support either the show, the podcast, or the cooking elements, whatever you want to do. And go to our YouTube channel. There's a bunch of free resources we put up there. This show is there, the Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker YouTube channel. And we also have cooking videos, how-to basic cooking skill videos. We have keto how-to videos, and we have funny videos like Cheese of the Week. So check those out. They're a lot of fun. And we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on The Fatty Joe Show. Be sure to leave a comment and subscribe. It helps the show reach more people. To support the show, as well as Carrie Brown and Yogi's work on the blog, keto recipe development, masterclasses, and to gain access to private Facebook groups and other awards, go to patreon.com/The Fatty Joe Show or patreon.com/Carrie Brown. Also, check out our Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker YouTube channel for video versions of The Fatty Joe Show, recipe videos, and more. Join our awesome community on the Facebook group, The Keto Kitchen with Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker, and check out our carriebrown.com website for recipes, blog posts, discounts, cookbooks, masterclasses, and other great stuff. Thank you so much.